It was at this point I realized I was in trouble. I suddenly get a battery warning of 40%, so I realize I need to abort the mission and get this bird home as quickly as possible. So I swing around to find my way back. I'm momentarily disoriented on which one of those little clearings I came from, but I knew which direction I needed to go, so I start trying to move in that direction. However, because of very high winds, as you can see from the flight path in the upper left, I'm getting blown way off course, even though my drone is pointed back to my takeoff point. I'm just getting blown all around by the very high winds. And at this point, I figure I better enable return to home. It's a button I can hit on my controller that will automatically just bring me back home. It has the home point marked with GPS coordinates. That way I don't have to try to figure out exactly where I am. However, I had that programmed to go up 250 feet before it flew back in order to clear obstacles, which I obviously didn't need flying off the top of this mountain, and I don't have enough battery to fly up 250 feet. So at this point I canceled the return to home and then tried to proceed manually to get back. And as you can see from the circuitous route that I'm taking, that I'm doing my best to fight my way back against the wind. I've already had a 30% battery warning, and it's still falling, so at this point I know I'm at high risk for losing this drone. If my drone goes down in this terrain, as you can see, there's no one going to be able to get to it except a mountain climber. So if my drone goes down here, it's lost, and we're talking $1,000. So as you can say, I had shaking fingers and sweaty hands at this point. At this point, I get a 10% battery warning, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose the drone at this point, but I'm still hoping I can make it. And now a number of things go wrong right now. All of a sudden the drone just refuses to come forward. I was getting an error on the screen that said obstacle. It's got forward sensors on this drone to keep you from hitting things, and it thought it saw something, and it must have been the sunlight streaming through those trees that it thought was something in front of it, and it just refused to move. At this point I switched to sport mode, which would turn off those sensors, but unbeknownst to me, that has to be enabled in the controller before the sport mode switch works on the controller. So that did absolutely nothing when I hit that switch. I'm getting high wind warnings, and it absolutely will not move. And I don't remember it, but it is at about this point my wife says that I started praying and said, God, please help me get my drone back home. And the things that happened next must have been an answer to prayer, which you'll see in just a moment. The drone does something that it would not normally do. And you can see the light there. That must be what the drone saw that thought was an obstacle and was just preventing it from moving forward. And then suddenly, for no particular reason, the drone started heading back at a high rate of speed. The battery voltage was so low at this point that we're starting to lose the camera. That's why the video looks so dark. Right here, the drone starts to auto land because the battery is going to die any second. And I am trying to override the auto land and force it up onto the ledge. Now I get a critically low power warning, which means the battery is about to die any second. And I made it back with just a few seconds to spare. As soon as I landed the drone, it shut itself off because the battery died completely. I avoided disaster by about 2 seconds, and definitely an answer to prayer that I got my drone back. I learned a number of lessons from this flight. The first one was that when I took off, I had, when I loaded up the battery into the drone, I had about 85% battery. It wasn't fully charged, and that was my first mistake. I thought, well, it's going to be a short flight, that'll be plenty of battery. And then the second thing I ran into was that someone else came up there to look out over the overview, and I waited for them to get done before I flew. The drone was on that whole time, and that used up some battery. I saw from the logs later that I only had about 50% battery when I took off. And the second error was I failed to take into account the high wind. And the third thing was I wasn't familiar with sport mode. I hadn't used it before and didn't know the switch would not enable it. And those three things are what caused me to almost lose my drone. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for flying with me.